Hey, what's up guys, I'm Josh and this is the Poke 2. All right, so here's the thing. This thing is obviously very unique looking. It's not gonna be for everybody. It's not really my styling, but at the same time, I'm super glad that they did this. This is a very unique looking amplifier, and it makes me think that I want more amplifiers that are willing to take visual risks, because amplifiers like this one are just kind of boring. But yeah, right away, stylizing is gonna be an obvious like hit or miss for certain people. So there's actually a lot of things that I wanna talk about on the build. One of them is that this product seems to be of kind of a different caliber of build than most of the XDuoo products I've looked at. Most of the products are not really built to this level. This is built like a Sony device almost. Like it's built really solidly, it feels good in the hand. The glass allows it to have kind of this anti-slip feeling to it, and it does appear to be real glass as far as I can tell. The buttons, the tolerances, the fit and finish of the blue and the coloration is just really high quality actually. I'm pretty impressed with this. The screen, like most XDuoo products, sucks. It's hard to see, there's not a lot of information there. I know you're not looking at it often, but when you really have to really search for what you're looking for, every time you look at it, it gets kind of old. This does have two USB-Cs, one for the input signal because this is a DAC and an amp, and the other is for charging. I'm not sure why this can't be the same port. I think they should get there if they can. This also has Bluetooth, and those are gonna be your two digital options, Bluetooth and USB-C. Now, the one actual complaint that I do have about build is the buttons, and buttons are a tricky subject. So the reason why I don't like buttons is because they make quick volume adjustments difficult. So for example, this has pretty good dynamics. Let's say you're listening to a song that is very low, so you kind of boost the volume so you can hear it, and then you go to the next song and maybe it's mixed super, super loud. Then you need to adjust the volume quickly so you don't hurt your ears, and that kind of takes a long time on a button like this. Now you might say that the solution to this is to make the button so that when you press the button and hold it, it goes down really quickly. And when you press the button to raise it, it goes up very quickly. Problem with this is that if this is in your pocket or your backpack and you're playing through it, if that button gets bumped, you could really do some serious hearing damage depending on the headphones. So the real solution becomes something like this, which is sort of a semi-guarded volume dial, which allows you to adjust via that dial. So you can go as quickly or as slowly as you want. And because it's guarded, it's not going to be easily bumped or pushed out of place. Because as of right now, the volume adjustments on this are very, very slow. This does have high and low gain. It does have two different DAC filtering options, different input selections. And on the side, it's got its power button, volume, EQ adjustments, which we'll talk about when we talk about sound, and then your Bluetooth pairing options. Okay, last note on the build here. This thing literally says Pokemon. I don't envy their legal team. Okay, so specs, like most of XDuoo's products, are okay, but not wonderful. If you're looking at total harmonic distortion, you're looking at 0.0015%, which isn't great for $400. It's not terrible, but it's not great. You've got an okay DAC and okay amplification style. This thing will put out about 780 milliwatts into 32 ohms out of the 4.4 millimeter, and about half that out of the 3.5 millimeter, though I don't think that this is technically a balanced amplifier. So for specs, this kind of hits somewhere in the middle territory for mobile DAC amps. This is some good and some bad. It's not the best, it's not the worst. Listening impressions though are really good if you're using the right products. So I used a number of different things with this. This loves IEMS. Okay, so one straight up downside that I think that they should look at addressing is a slight noise floor on really efficient IEMs. Not on every IEM will you notice, but on some you will when you're not playing music. Now, I don't typically review a lot of XDuoo products, and I really don't review a lot of mobile XDuoo products, and the reason why is because historically they've been very bright and very glary in the top and just kind of thin sounding and not really great. This is the first one that I've heard and actually felt like it was a really fulfilled mobile experience. And in fact, this may actually go against the glare of some of its predecessors and actually have a slightly darker treble experience than I think is considered a reference, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because this still hits pretty hard on the detail front. So it's detailed without being bright. It's got a solid low end, okay mid-range, we'll talk about that. But with the right pairings, I think that this thing is actually really good. So let's talk about some of those good and bad pairings. So I think an IE600 is really gonna be a pretty typical use case for this thing. It's a high-end IEM, which I think a lot of mobile $400 DAC amp users might have, and it's a really well-performing one with pretty even performance across the board, so it's very easy to judge the performance of this on. That pairing is pretty good. The Sennheiser tonality really shines through on that IE600. The bass response is exceptional, especially with the use of the EQ adjustments, which actually I find works better on IEMs than it does on full-size headphones. Either way, it works pretty well as expected. It's just different frequency tuning adjustments. For an IEM like the IE600 though, this has far more power than you would ever really need. Though I do actually find the bottom half of the volume, even on high gain, is relatively useless. Like I don't really have any IEMs, even my most efficient, super expensive Fur M5 IEMs, those don't get loud until after 50 out of 100 on the volume dial. So I'm not sure what would use the 1 to 50 range, because those things are super efficient for everything, but that bottom half of the volume dial is basically useless on this. Now, something that really shocked me and kind of made it clear that you really had to pair the right things with this was a pairing with the Meze Elites, which is a $4,000 ISO dynamic planar headphone. And those things on this, it's awesome. Like, it's so good. It keeps the mid bass from blooming on that headphone, which it has a tinge of a problem with. It really kept that clean and not boxy or bloated at all, but it still had this deep sub bass that was able to come through. And this little amplifier, even though it doesn't have a ton of power, was still able to really shove that driver wherever it wanted for the bass response, maintaining this deep and clear response in the sub bass. Now, another thing that was really impressive, and after hearing the IEMs that I had tested, I was expecting not a lot of dynamic range in all frequencies for the Meze, and I was also not expecting a lot of top end. And yet, oddly enough, I got extreme dynamic range and really good top end. So a song like Final Ascent from Hans Zimmer, the soundtrack for James Bond, the crescendo in that song was both exceptionally dynamic, but also had the brilliance of all the horns and the strings and everything kind of coming together. It was really able to shine in a way that I don't think I've really gotten a whole lot from that headphone out of other amplifiers. So that was pretty impressive. The EQ adjustments also do work well on that because it's a fairly efficient headphone. And notably, the craziest part of all this was that was out of the half-powered 3.5 millimeter, and it was still able to drive it. So then I thought to myself, okay, let me stress test this and give it like an actual difficult planar. And that's where I started to see some of the shortcomings with it. I listened to the Diana V2 through the 4.4 millimeter, and that's where you start to see a little bit of the roll off on the top end and a little bit of a shift in the mid-range compared to my reference system, which is a topping A90 and a D90, which is an incredibly clear and concise NFCA amplifier and DAC system. Compared to that, on that headphone, the mid-range is a little bit thin on this. It doesn't quite have the tonal properties and kind of vocal saturated richness that I would listen for on that A90. The bass response was also a little bit light, and on that specific headphone, I felt like I was getting sort of a little bit more of a mono experience. Things didn't seem quite as surrounding and encompassing and felt a little bit more center focused. So right now, just the way that this has worked out, this is like the only mobile amp that I have to compare against this thing. So this has more of a clinical sterile sound signature, not a lot of extra fun. It's very technical with its detail and very linear with its sound signature. If you're more of a technical listener, I think this is obviously going to lean towards your preference. I would get this and like a mobile DAC just to hook up to this, and probably get this one. It's also got a little bit more power, so it can power a little bit more of those higher demanding headphones. This thing, I think, leans a little bit more fun, kind of how the looks would suggest. It's a little bit less pure in sound quality and has like the fun EQ adjustments, but it's also an all-in-one. So if having just one unit versus this and a DAC is important to you, I would say that this one's better. I'm sorry I don't have a more apt comparison, but that's kind of the best I can do right now. Now, my conclusion, I wouldn't personally go and purchase this for the looks, but I can see some people. But if this is like a different design and they maybe kept like the different face plates on the front and the back and just did different colors and maybe some alternative designs, I think I might actually pick something up like this, because I like the concept of really unique looking DAC amps like this. Now, sound quality for the money, I do like it, but I also recognize that for about $400, you can get some really good stuff. If you're primarily listening at a desk, you can get something like a Magnus and a Modius, and that's gonna have far more power and, in my opinion, better sound quality and less noise floor than this with more input options. But if you go mobile a lot, this is going to be obviously a better option. On the flip side, if you just like technicality, this in an Apple dongle, I do think actually outcompetes that for about half the price. But it won't have Bluetooth, and it won't have the EQ options, and it won't have kind of the more fun sound signature of the Poke. Is it Poke 2? Poke? I don't know. Oh, and last thing is, if I missed some sort of lore about this character, if there even is any, I'm sorry, I couldn't find anything. I didn't really look that hard because it doesn't really matter for the performance of this thing. So if there is information on this guy and why he says Poke and why the product says Pokemon, I'd love to know it down in the description. I don't know if they're just banking on not getting sued or what, but not my problem. Bye.